Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Lonely Wrist. Sitting in front of me is my friend Mitch Katz, the author of Time on My Hands, A Collector's Journey in the World of Watches. Welcome to the episode, Mitch.
How you doing, Blake?
I'm surviving. I'm surviving. I think that's
Yeah.
what most collectors will say these days. So, first of all, congratulations on the release of the book. Uh, I look I look forward to reading it. Um, Tell us how you started watch collecting, and tell us how you got to where you are here to release a book.
Watch collecting started with my dad in the sense that he was an ultimate collector. He collected stamps. So he developed the collector gene and uh, passed it on to me, and I have in turn passed it on to my sons. And uh, Sadly, when he died, um, passed a bit of money to me, and I wanted something to memorialize him by. And I'm not a car guy. My kid's college education was covered. Have a house, and we were driving around one day, and I said to my wife, "I want something more permanent to memorialize my dad." And I just said, "I want to buy a watch." So went to this watch store I had purchased some watches in the past from, and I was rooting around and came to a Maurice Lacroix masterpiece annuaire, and looked at it, and it was at the time spoke to me, and I said, "Yeah, I like this watch, but geez, it's a lot of money." Got the nervous shakes and the sweaty upper lip. And I walked outside of the store, called a friend of mine who I knew something about watches, and we talked about it. He said, "Yeah, it's it's a good watch. It's worth the money." "It's a lot of money, man." And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Just do it." And so I brought it home, and there was the hook. And then a couple weeks later, we went away. My wife and I went away to Santa Barbara to celebrate our anniversary. And we were walking down State Street and came upon a magazine stand. And there was this magazine called Watch Time. Terry Staubach was on the cover. And I got it. I bought it and brought it back to the hotel. And I read it from cover to cover. And somewhere in there, there was a reference to the fact that watches have an oil reservoir. It's like, say what? And I can remember coming home after the weekend and dashing into one of my son's bedrooms, and I said, "Guess this, get this. Watches have oil reservoirs. Can you believe this?" And he looked at me like I had lost my mind, which I probably already had. The hook was now implanted, and a gentle tug came, and the rest, as they say, is history. And I went down that rabbit hole hard and fast and haven't looked up since.
The irony, considering the listeners are listening to this podcast right now, and they just probably got done listening to the CEO of Maurice Lacroix that just came on. So there is some irony there. And I'm curious, and that's an interesting story on how you got into watches. But obviously, with the release on your book, um, you know, tell us what inspired you to write a book about watch collecting, because it doesn't seem like the most common thing for a watch collector to do. But it is, I think, interesting how you got here.
Again, it all lands on my sons. I have been extraordinarily fortunate. And I say that with all due modesty and appreciation for what I have been given during my collecting journey. But I was talking to my sons individually, and I said, this is a watch collection now, and you need to know something about it. And they both said, well, yeah, we know some of your watches, we know some names, but we don't really know what you have. I said, okay, that makes sense. So I sat down one night and I wrote a spreadsheet. And with all clarity, I put in the name of the watches and some valuation and some resources that they could always check into if they need be. And I realized, I sent it to them and I realized this is not what it's about. The watches are not about names and numbers and value. It's about what each watch represented to me, the stories behind them, why I obtained them, how I obtained them, why they still sit in the bank or where sit on my wrist. It's more the story and the joy that they represent. And I said, yeah, this is nothing. I've got to tell them the story of these watches so they have better appreciation of what the watches are and what they mean to me. And we are fortunate to have an art collection. And it's the same thing. When I look at a painting or when I look at a watch, it's the stories they evoke, the history, the adventures that we had in obtaining them, having obtained them, the relationships that developed subsequently with the watchmaker or the artist, what have you. Um, and that's what made it important to me to put that down in some sort of literary form. And as approached retirement, I knew it was coming, and I said, "Okay, it's a good time to write this book." And I started making notes, and it just flowed. I had once I retired, I wrote the first version in 3 months,
Wow.
and it's because I just regurgitated into the computer. It was that easy. Of course, then it came to the editing and fleshing stories out, but between my memory, the pictures my wife showed me, the memories she reminded me of, it was an easy work of love, quite frankly. And it was just so wonderful to revisit those times as if they were just yesterday.
Yeah, that's something that whenever you talked about how it regurgitated, if I were to do the same thing, I don't even know if I could do it because every time I look at one of the watches in my collection, I have just over 150 watches myself. Just a storm of emotions comes over me. Like, oh, I remember when I was in Turkey and I was wearing this watch and I got lost in the Grand Bazaar and I was looking for my wife and she was lost and we were trying to find each other and yada yada. Like, um, and also subsequently, the bad moments. I know this sounds weird, but somebody asked me recently, like, what I think, like, why I watch collect, and I think it's because watches are time capsules, literally and non-literally, where they tell you the future, but they also store the past. And um, and to me, I think about all the weird ups and downs of life that have been through every single watch, and I just don't even know, I don't even know how you could simplify that. I don't know how you could spill that out, because I could talk for years about one watch. If my wife was like, "Oh, what's important about this watch to you?" I would just go on forever.
Well, it gets a little easier when you know that you can't write 500,000 words.
Yeah, 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 totally.
And nobody wants to hear those 500,000 words or read them. But you know how you do it, Blake? You just sit down and you write the first page.
I'm
That's it.
assuming the first page leads to the second page, and then the
Exactly. And that's what I found. I found that when I started the first page, the day after I retired, the day after I dropped the mic, I sat down and I wrote 3 pages. And then it just came. And then I try to connect the watches in some sort of illogical, logical fashion, that one watch led to another, even though they may be totally distinctly different. And it was fun. It was a lot of fun. Oh, that's why I got this watch, because it connected to the one previous to that, or one three down the line. It was fun. And really, uh, I'm not a self promoter. I
Sure.
did this because, A, I want people to understand that it's more than a commodity.
Sure.
I want people to feel like they have their own story. And when I was thinking about even doing this, I realized there are plenty of books that have stories about watches, pictures about watches, stories about watchmakers, about watch companies. But there's very few books that approach it from the collector. And if anything, I want people to feel free to make the choices they want to make and enjoy their choices, rather than having somebody tell them what they should have, or what A-lister is wearing this, so I've got to have it. Now, if that's how you want to approach this, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. And all power to them. That's not what I want to do. And it's not how I've grown into this passion. And it's worked for me for 25 years.
We our listeners are kind of very broad spectrum in their collecting journey. We have a lot of people that are just enthusiasts. I don't even know if I'd use the word collectors anymore. Like, we have a watch club here in Vegas, and it's catered towards enthusiasts. Like, if you have one watch and it's a Citizen and you're passionate about horology, like, you're welcome. Also, if you have 150 Rolexes and Pateks, like, you're also welcome. But but people do get lost in the hype, and every collector I've met has, like, and you may or may not, but as a collector, I evolve every time I acquire a new watch. Like, what I consider to be collectible and how I bring new watches into my collection changes every single watch I bring into the collection. But also I learn a little bit more about myself every time I bring a new watch in, because I'm like, oh, I'm out experiencing the world, and I'm like, I need a watch that I can wear in the middle of Uzbekistan, where I have no idea where I am and nobody knows what I'm wearing, and I feel comfortable wearing a watch like that. Versus here in Vegas, where I'm walking down the strip with the Rolex, and everybody else has a Rolex. I try and look for situations that I can bring a watch into.
I know exactly what you're talking about. In fact, in the book, I write about just that. When I was working, I had certain classes of watches that I would go do when I was uh, being very active at work. The other watches where I was just going to be sitting at my desk, evening watches, weekend warrior watches, that kind of category. I did categorize them, and if I was looking at another watch, I'd say, okay, what category does that fit into? Then when I retired, what I did not expect is that I had to reclassify all my watches, because the tool watches that I would wear at work when I was active, and I didn't want to have to worry about if I got dinged them a little or whatever. I didn't have to think about that anymore. So how do I classify the watch so I'm sure to be wearing the watch on some degree of regularity? Now, fortunately, watches do not have personalities, they do not have feelings, and they will not be hurt or bothered if you were wearing the watch on a more regular basis when working and now less often. Luckily, I have not had to give therapy to the watches, but still, I like to wear it. When I wear a watch, I haven't worn this watch in a while. I want to wear it. It's fun. Every watch I have, I wear. Some to a greater extent than others because of specialness of the watch or what have you. I have my reasons, but and to your point, if I'm traveling, I'm going to take certain watches, whereas I'm not going to take others for reasons I don't want to a lose them, or b I don't want anything to happen to them.
Exactly.
In fact, the cover of the book has a bunch of my watches photographed. We did that to mimic another picture that had been taken in the past, and it just so happened, and not by plan or anything, that almost dead center is this yellow dialed Ulysse Nardin GMT plus minus that my family calls the Goofy watch. Why is it called the Goofy watch? Because it's yellow, quite frankly. And of all the watches I own, my older son has told me that's the watch I want. I said, why? I mean, you have so many other choices. He said, that's the watch you wear whenever you travel, which is true. That is my traveling watch because it's robust, it takes a beating and it keeps on ticking. Uh, but he is associated with that. And that's important to him. And that's what this is all about. What do those watches mean in the more global sense than just telling time?
And it seems like from our previous discussion, like Ulysse Nardin is a brand that holds a very special place in your heart. I think you told me you have so many. I don't want to put numbers out unless you're willing to do so, but what is it about Ulysse Nardin? And it could be another brand, like would you say that you gravitate towards UN more than other brands or
My journey has been varied. Interests wax and they wane. In the 2000s and early teens, I think Ulysse Nardin was and can still be at the forefront of technological advancement. I mean, Rolf empowered his team to develop the first watch that used silicium. The very first watch. And now, how many brands include silicium in their watches? I
every?
most. I mean, there's still debate amongst watchmakers. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? What about 100 years from now? Regardless, he was brave enough, entrepreneurial enough, interested enough, and just crazy enough to say, let's take this new substance and we can use it in a way that makes sense in a watch. The simple GMT plus minus, the Goofy watch, is probably the most user-friendly travel watch in the market. It's underappreciated. But what Ludwig Oxland did by just creating this GMT plus minus is just such a easy watch to use and easy watch to travel watch with because it tells you everything you need to know. The and I could go on about the different models and why I think they're the best of class. Even now, even though it's 10, 12 years later, they're still best in class. What I'm wearing today is one of the trilogy. That to me are just insane. They're probably the one watch set of watches that scare me the most because trying to set them is just a challenge.
A long and son? Is that what you're wearing?
No, no, no. The trilogy of Ulysse Nardin.
Oh, okay. Okay. I thought you meant like the Holy Trilogy.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. No,
No.
go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I'm a huge fan of UN, and I've done events with them, and I've had the chance to sit down with leadership, and they've. I'm drinking the UN Kool Aid, totally, and yeah, I when they released the Freak Ass Nomad, from Watches and Wonders this past year, Like I was insanely surprised, and before they released it, um, FX and I were here in Vegas, and we were just kind of like walking around boutiques, and I said, "Oh, like what are you guys working on for Watches and Wonders? Like, give me something." And he said, "We're releasing one watch." And I was like, "What?" You know, because usually people are like, you look at other brands, they're releasing like 6, 7, 8 different pieces, and they're kind of flushing out their collection. And he said, "No, no, we're doing the exact opposite. We're releasing one watch." And I was like, "Okay, that seems a little weird." And anyways, come Watches and Wonders, I when I saw the watch, I was just like mesmerized at how cool it is and just the whole marketing behind it. And they had like a little like UAV like flying through the clouds and like we wrote an article about it and yeah, and then they at our last event we did with you, and which was last month, maybe a month and a half ago. We got to see the new Watches of Switzerland
Mhm.
edition of the Freak S Nomad, which has I think it's like a crystallinium dial. Have you seen
Okay,
that?
yeah, 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 yeah. Not
Insane.
not in person.
Insane. Yeah, I got a chance to see it
Mhm.
secretly. They snuck me in the back room and they said, "Hey, like take a look at this. Like what do you think?" And one of the most beautiful like dials I have ever seen.
And
Uh,
I'm hoping that speaks for a rebirth, if you will, of the company now that it's under different leadership.
yeah.
And I'm really hope they find their way again.
Bring back independent watchmakers.
Exactly. And then people who get the idea that it's okay to be a little bit nuts and a little bit experimental in what they're willing to do.
I mean, I think modern generations respond really well to that. Like, if you look at somebody who walks the line between sane and crazy, those are the people that are influential for the next decade. And you look at celebrities that dress like cross dressing, like or whatever. You just look at people that are like heterosexual people that are like wearing nail polish and have long hair and just um 20 years ago they would be looked at very weird in a weird way.
Well, understood. And that's where the independents come in.
Yeah,
I mean, they have the ability to be on the cutting edge or to be a little crazy because they don't have shareholders.
yeah, totally.
And it's I look to them and have done a lot of work with them because they're on the edge or they can be on the edge. Some are very, very classical. Others just push the the edge and just go out into just total weirdness, which is necessary. Now, some of them may not be to my liking or
Sure.
something I would not want to wear on my wrist, but that doesn't mean that there's not a role for them. It's a role to push the more staid companies in a direction that the collector, the consumer, is interested in going to.
Yeah, no, I align very perfectly with you in that regard. um I'm curious to get your take. So as a watch collector, do you have rules that you impose on yourself before you bring a new watch into your collection? How do you decide like what to bring in? And I mean, another question is, sometimes I hear people that don't ever get rid of a watch. So do you one, do you flush out your collection? Or if yes, like how do you decide what to do? And then before you bring a new watch in, what do you consider?
The second question first. Have I
Sure.
flushed out my collection? I have gone on 2 culling expeditions. The first one was easy because, I realized there were several watches I just didn't want. Now, we're not talking huge numbers here, we're talking
Sure.
a few, and I comfortably parted with them, and interestingly, and it's debatable whether this was a brilliant idea, I included in it was my first watch. I called it.
Oh.
Um, Not the magazine, but the watch.
Yeah, yeah.
And, I still sometimes think about it just because of what it represented, but it just didn't mean much to me at that point.
Huh.
And the second time I called, I couldn't do it. I actually had a friend come, a friend who knows about watches, and he looked at the collection. He knew what I had, and we discussed certain pieces that just didn't fit. And so we put several of them up for sale, and fortunately, one didn't sell because my wife actually really liked the watch, and she now wears it. And maybe there's one watch there that I'm a little bit sorry I sold, although it didn't suit my OCD tendencies. It was just hard to set and hard to maintain. But in retrospect, I think the few watches I've parted with, I'm okay with, and haven't sought to regain them, which I know some people do. And I enjoy what I have, but for the most part, I buy to hold. Now, to the first question, how do I determine what comes into the collection? Well, it's the old saying, you have to kiss a lot of frogs to find the prince, right? And I've kissed a lot of frogs. By that I mean I've looked, and you go around, there's very few watch stores I will walk by and not go in to look at the watches. And it could be high end, low end, it doesn't matter. And then over time, you decide on your own eye, your own interest, and really what fits my vision. Do I have a plan going in? No. Do I can I vocalize why one watch versus another? Maybe, but really not really. It's like what appeals to me. Let me give you a story. As I said, we have a bit of an art collection, and we had a space that right where I'm sitting, where I was looking for a painting to put up on the wall. Now, we don't buy art to fill spaces, but rather we find spaces for the art we purchase. But we had a space, and there was a particular artist that we really liked. We have several small pieces by this artist, and wanted to get a more substantial piece. And the gallerist that we work with often let me know that he had a piece. So we went down and really liked the piece, brought it home, and put it on the floor next to my desk. And so it stood there for about 2 weeks. Couldn't put it up on the wall. And if you ask me why, I can't tell you. To this day, I can't tell you. And eventually I said to my wife, I said, I can't put it up. And she said, I know. I said, I like it. I really like it. But I just can't put it up there. So we said, okay, let's bring it back. So we brought it back to the gallery, and we're friends with the owner. And he said, I said, I can't do it. And he said, that's fine. It's fine. Just bring it back. We're good. And he was standing there, and this is how long ago this occurred. He was flipping through transparencies because that's how they showed art at that time.
Sure.
And I spied something, one of the transparencies. I said, hang on a second, who is that? And he showed me the transparency. I knew the artist, and I said, where is that painting? And he said, oh, it's in the back. I said, can I go see it? He said, yeah, sure, go. And I went in. I was all alone. My wife was talking to him. I walked in and I saw the painting, and I literally had to sit down. I was so overwhelmed by it. Within a minute, 2 minutes, I was committed to that painting. It sits on my wall now, and to this day, I love this thing. And if you ask me why, because it's very minimalist, it's very abstract. If you ask me why I love this piece of art, I can't tell you. But
Hmm.
I have an emotional connection to that, which I don't have with that I didn't have with that other piece. And I can't explain to you. It is not a rational thought. And the same thing has come with a lot of the watches. Why do I connect with that watch versus other watches? I don't know sometimes. Sometimes it's obvious, the technology, the artistry, the finishing. Okay, there are some reasons. But why one watch versus another watch? It's my eye. And that's what I wish for other people, is to trust your own eye, trust your own heart, and say, this is what appeals to me. It doesn't have to appeal to anybody else, but it appeals to me. Because ultimately, that's going to be on your wrist. That's going to be with you. That is your child now. And enjoy it for what it is. All too many times, people will come up to me and show me a watch, and they say, well, I know it's not anything that you would ever want or something like that. And it's like, well, time out, time out, time out. Do you like that watch? Yeah. Do you really like that watch? Yeah. So what's the problem here? There is no problem. It's giving you what it is intended to give, and that is joy. And it doesn't matter if it's a Casio or a Swatch watch or a Patek or whatever. If it gives you joy, that's the right watch for you.
Yeah, I mean, everybody, I wish I had an alarm bell to sound off because I mean that is the most important thing here. Um I find myself as a collector trying to not be a collector. And I know that sounds really weird, but like for me, right? I've tried to map out my collection. Like I have the Chrono 24 like wish list and this and that, and I tell myself and I tell my friends and I tell my wife, once I get these watches into my collection, like I'll be done. Like that will be it for me. And and I somehow will get that watch and I won't be done. So I actively try to stop collecting, but I can't. So it poses the question, as a collector, do you ever really feel like you're done collecting? Um or y- y- I just
um, I cannot. The reason I just laugh is because I cannot tell you how often I hear my friends say this. They could have been collecting for 40 years. I'm done. I am absolutely done. This is it. I'm done. And you walk in the next time you see him. Hey, what do you got? Oh yeah, I just picked this up. It's like, oh, yeah, okay. So I call crap on people who say they're done, because you're never done. You're really not. It's rare. I'm not saying it's never happened, but it's rare. When I got the trilogy, the UN trilogy,
yep, yep.
I said that's my grail, and I said I'm done. Well, that didn't happen. Then when I got my carry, I looked at it and I said, the finishing is so incredible. The dial is so beautiful. Where do you go from there? I ain't done. I mean, it's why am I kidding myself? And why are we all kidding? It's just it's there, and it could be sometimes it's a relatively inexpensive piece, and sometimes it's a more costly piece. But it's like you're just not done, and you can justify them all to you, and it every piece gives joy. How can you deny that? Face it, it's an addiction. You get the dopamine surge when you get that new watch. So when people say, "What's your favorite watch?" I mean, the true collector says, "Well, it's
Yeah.
either the last watch I got or the next one I'm going to get." And when I was writing the book, it occurred to me, I did a little thing about the Grail, and I realized, what's the Grail for a mountain climber? To climb Everest, right? Something like that. Okay, so you climb Everest, you're never going to climb another mountain? Really? You're going to go up other mountains.
Yeah.
It's not, it may not be of the same height, um, but you're still gonna go on hikes, you're still gonna go on treks. You are. It's in your DNA. It's in your guts to go there. And it's the same thing with collecting. And it doesn't have to be all watches. I don't think my son will ever not buy another guitar because he loves guitars. It's I think it's all part and parcel of the collecting gene.
Do I'm assuming you probably have your eyes on more pieces that you're
Oh
probably.
no, I'm done.
Oh, are you?
Yeah, right. Okay.
Uh, uh,
Yes.
oh, okay, okay. Yeah, because I when we first talked, I got the sense that you have reached Everest, right? And you've summited that, and you're just kind of enjoying in your in your summits. I got that vibe from you.
Nope. Nope. My wife said, when you retired, I thought you were going to cut back. I said, yeah, no. In fact, yeah, I do have my eye on several pieces. There are pieces coming, um, more from various independents. Um, and in fact, this weekend I just saw an incredible watch that I am trying to figure out how this is going to work. The Chopard Full Strike. If you've ever seen that watch and listened to that watch,
It's beautiful.
it's amazing. And the technology behind it is one of a kind. The clarity of the sound, the loudness of the sound. They also don't have the ghost quarter. Do you know what that is? The ghost quarter?
No, no,
Okay, so in minute repeaters, you have it first chimes the hour, then it chimes the quarter, and then it chimes the minute. In many repeaters, if say it's 12 after the hour, you'll have the chimes of the hour. Then there'll be a pause where the quarters are supposed to chime, but since it's 12 minutes after, there is no quarter chime. So there's this pause. And then the minutes chime. What Chopard is able to engineer in this watch is they took away that pause.
wow.
So you have the hour and then immediately the minute. The only other company that I know to have done this is JLC with their HM11. They had that, but I am told the technology is different. I can't tell you how. I don't
Sure.
understand it, but that to me is a remarkable achievement because the standard uh, repeaters have that ghost quarter in the
Got
first.
it. Yeah, I find myself kind of in the middle segment of collecting, and when I say middle segment, like I notice I tend to gravitate towards like sporty tool watches, practical watches, um, and as an overviewing bird's eye perspective of my collection, I look down and I don't have a lot of dress pieces, because I never dress up. I'd say 9 out of 10 times I'm wearing like shorts and a t-shirt. I live in Vegas. I don't wear blazers all the time, and I can't pull them off because it's just so damn hot. But because I've noticed in my life, sporty pieces can go both ways. Like you can easily take a sporty watch and dress it up, and you can also dress it down. But I've noticed the dressier watches are harder to dress down. And I realized I wore. I mean, what would have been the epitome of a sports watch in the 20s, the Reverso. Um, I wore it with basketball pants and a t-shirt to breakfast with my wife, and I was like, okay, this is a little different, but nonetheless, I realized it probably on paper wasn't a good idea, but somehow I got away with it.
Why? Okay, this is what we're talking about. First of all, the fact that our tendencies, our eyes go to different parts of the showcase. Who cares? Really, who cares? Is yours any less valuable than mine? No, not at all. Um, it may be a little more affordable, but
Yeah,
the fact is that, do you buy 3 watches for the same price you can buy 1? That's your choice, but you're enjoying it. I I I I have not really figured my brain out to say dressing for the watch. I think that is your set, and I'm not being critical at all, but
no,
it
of
is
course.
your set of parameters.
Yeah,
It's like when I went to work, I would wear certain watches because not because it fit with what I was dressing, but I was concerned that if bang a watch that's very fragile or very valuable, it's going to be an issue. But so that's why I tended towards certain work watches. On the other hand, it took me a while, but I started wearing more expensive, value, precious watches to work when at least I knew I wasn't going to be concerned about what might happen to the watch. Sitting at my desk, answering phone calls, working on the computer, whatever, going to meetings. That's another category of watches, and that is the conference watch. One should always have a conference watch because I think if I was to advise anybody, you go to these meetings, you're bored out of your gourd. Tacky to pull out your phone because it's kind of not polite. But
sure.
to look at a watch and just play with the watch subtly, people not going to really know what you're doing. It's kind of fun, and I have several of those watches. And I've actually come up with some ideas during those boring meetings. But be that as it may, but as far as what dresses to how you dress for the watch, that's your parameter. I think I would argue that 90% of the people out there, especially those who don't know much about watches, don't care. If
Yeah.
you want to wear a paddock, whatever, um, and work in the garden, it's fine. I remember a long time ago, I was talking to some guy who's a landscaper, in the landscaping business, and he proudly showed me his brigade. It was beaten to pulp, but he loved the watch, and he
That's
wasn't afraid to wear the watch.
that's awesome.
Yeah, that's what it's about. Wear it. The one thing that watches are made for is to be worn. And that was brought home to me even more so when George Daniels' watch collection went up for auction. It was a couple of years after he had died, and you look at the watches that were being put up for auction, and some of them were just beaten to shreds. But yet he had warned them. That's what this is about. And that to me shows love. If a
Yeah.
watch has been it's been used because of what it's supposed to be for, not to sit in a safe, not to sit in some closet, but to be worn and enjoyed and appreciated.
I find myself like well, I guess maybe I'll echo a question that I get all the time and I don't know how to answer. So maybe you will, but how do you know what watch you're going to wear when you have so many?
um, when I open my eyes in the morning, the first thing, oftentimes, the first thing I think about is what watch am I going to wear? Because then it makes getting dressed easier. I mean, we just talked about
Yeah, yeah.
dressing for the watch, whatever. So it's easy. You say, okay, what am I putting on? Is it going to be a steel watch or a precious metal watch? Okay, and then what color is the strap? Because your belt should match your strap. And if you're wearing a certain color belt, you have to wear shoes. Now, if you wear the proper shoes, now if the proper shoes have to go with the right pants and shirt, otherwise you look ridiculous. So, I mean, and I say it a little bit tongue in cheek, but not totally. But oftentimes, particularly when I was going to work, the first thing I would think about is what watch was I wearing, and I don't wear the same watch 2 days in a row, except on very rare occasions. And so, yeah, that's the first thing I think about.
I,
And usually, it's a little bit of a struggle sometimes.
I
But
yeah, I find myself with the same things, and sometimes I'm so conflicted I don't even wear a watch.
oh God, that's allowed? Are you not naked?
I feel naked, but I'm like, I want to wear this watch, but I want to wear that one, but I want to. And sometimes, like for those days that I don't wear a watch, I'll wear like three or four in one day, and I'll just be
Mhm.
like, all right, cool. Like lunchtime, let me change up my watch. Um, and I have these weird phases, but I also was talking to one of my colleagues, and he had like a default where like if he gets tired of wearing a watch, he will like default back to a watch, like a palate cleanser watch.
Uh-huh.
Um and I have a few of those where I'm like, all right, I'm tired of wearing this, I'm tired of wearing that, I'm tired of wearing this. Like, let me go back to my palate cleanser. Do you have one of those?
No,
Or is it you don't? Okay.
no, no. Actually, the struggle I have is, well, one of the saddest days of my watch collecting career is when we decided, we meaning my wife and I, that we can no longer keep the watches in the house. That we have to put them in a safe, secure place, and
Sure, sure.
started using uh, a safe deposit box. That's where the stress is because when I go there, I want to bring them all home because I want to play with them. I want to wear them. I don't want to have to think about it. And here I go, and you can't go there every day. I mean, there have been times when I go every week to exchange them, but that's the stress to me because which watches am I going to bring home this week or for the next couple of weeks? That to me is stress because I want to wear them all. I don't like that that's where they are, but one has to be responsible.
Yeah, no, I am very fortunate that I have all my watches close by. Let me say that. And at a moment's notice, I can grab pretty much any of them. And it is indeed a blessing for sure. Um, but again, I don't have, the same amount of high complication. I tend to trend into that middle segment. Um, yeah, yeah. I mean, a lot of my friends look at my collection. They say, "Holy shit," like, wow, and so, anyways, I'm very fortunate for that. Uh, I'm curious. My dogs are going crazy here for whatever reason. Maybe they believe they are aligning with what you're saying. Um, but do you ever, as a collector, there's also like that Grail watch that got away, right? Like maybe you saw a watch at auction and you were bidding and then you said, "Oh shit, like it's way too much." Like, or I just I don't want to spend that much on this watch, or maybe one that came in that you let go of, or you said you've only let go of a couple watches, but do you have the one that got away? Like, has that? I'm assuming that's happened to you.
The what comes immediately to mind is the Roger Smith um, pocket watch number two. Um, the I saw it. I went up to Phillips to see it, and man, that thing was beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And I was on vacation in Europe when it came up for auction, and I said, "I'm going to bid on it. I'm just going to bid on it. Say I could bid on it." So I was with a friend who was also into watches, and we were sitting at a coffee shop, and I was able to get the auction, and the watch comes up, and my finger was poised on the bid button, and the price just shot way up, and it's like, okay, done. Not even going to bother. Um, and then I subsequently was talking to somebody who knew the ultimate buyer. He said, "Yeah, that person would have kept going," and that really, I knew would never come home because it was just, it wasn't even at a tenth of the price. I couldn't afford it, but it was just the fun of bidding on it. Um, Besides that, has anything gotten away in very early on? I'm going to turn the question around a little bit.
Okay.
Very early on, I had the opportunity to get a Philippe Dufour Simplicity, and I write about it in the book actually. And it was at its commercially released price, and I got to the point of, well, what case do you want? What dial do you want? Yada yada yada. And at the time, it was just didn't pass the sleep test. The money was too much, and I backed out. Now you could say 15 years later, that was a mistake. Should have done it. You know, and you know what? I'm fine. For very many reasons, I'm fine. At that moment in time, it was more money that I could justify to myself, much less my family. It was not that important to me. I wasn't there yet in my sophistication. I wasn't there yet in my appreciation for what it was. And I'd look at it and said, yeah, it would have been nice, but and now certainly given the extent of the collection, it would have been a nice compliment too. But I'm okay because at that moment it wasn't right for me, for any one of a number of reasons. So, if you regret to me is a useless emotion because you can't do anything about it. So, are there other watches that have come and gone that I did not get that maybe I would have liked it? Maybe there are a few, but I would rather turn it in. But for that, look what I do have. And I love what I have, and I appreciate what I have. And I look forward, I don't look back. It just doesn't help. And again, I've been very fortunate and very lucky. And some of the pieces are incredibly rare. And that to me is enough. That's good. Doesn't mean it's enough to stop, but it's enough to assuage any potential. "Oh, I wish I had that." I don't wish I had anything.
I'm literally like you're reading the words right out of my head that I was gonna ask if you have any regrets as a collector.
No, not really. I can't think of a one. The decisions made at the time were made for whatever reason, and it was right at that decision was right at that time for whatever reason. One watch that was interesting, I wanted to get when uh, Zenith was releasing their Defy, I think it was the Defy Lab or whatever with the
Yeah, like
silicium
the
movement.
yep,
Yeah, yeah, extreme, whatever it
Extreme
was.
Lab, whatever. Yeah.
I wanted to be one of the 10. I was really disappointed that I didn't get one of those. And the AD I was working with, and the rep was working, trying to convince Geneva, really Beaver, to allocate one to me. And I was disappointed about that. I really was. Well, as it turns out, those watches didn't work. And I just recently read something that said they were all returned, actually.
Hmm.
And it's like, okay, so maybe I was fortunate I didn't get what I wished for. So sometimes things, if you will, be magical and say things happen for a reason. But did I lose sleep over it? Yeah, I was disappointed at the time, but you move on.
Zenith is a crazy brand because they are pushing the envelope within their own constraints. Like you look at a watch brand that has that umbrella, like a non-independent that
Mhm,
has the big puppet masters kind of doing their things up there, and then I mean I'm wearing the Chronomaster sport,
mhm,
but they do well for within their organization that they
mhm.
have, and I was very fortunate enough in March or January, I don't remember, it was a big blur, um to go to their factory and to see how they produce watches, and we actually have a YouTube video about it, and to go to the attic, and it's a brand that I hold close to my heart, and yeah. Anyways, then this is one of my favorite brands.
If they have
Uh,
a very strong history,
mhm,
again, I would put them as strong brand underappreciated.
totally,
Mhm.
totally. I Same thing. Um, Moving a little forward, um, we talked about having no regrets as a collector, but do you have that summit moment? We talked about summiting Everest. Um, as a collector, what would you consider that summit moment for you as a watch collector? Like, okay, I've done it. I've, you know, I've reached what I've accomplished what I set out to accomplish as a watch collector.
That means I have, again, it comes back to, do you have a goal in mind? And I really don't. Um, I yeah, you can pick certain watches. I would love to have another Roger Smith. I would love to. Uh, I would love to have a pocket watch, but not just a pocket watch. I would love to have a special pocket watch. I don't know. It's about 20 years ago. A f- I was at a watch gathering and somebody brought in a Breguet pocket watch. To me, that would be incredible. When I met George Daniels, I asked him, "What is the right watch collection?" And he said, without skipping a beat, two Daniels and a pocket watch. And I don't know what pocket watch he was referring to. One of my, again, I said no regrets, but one of my biggest regrets, he had said two Daniels and a pocket watch. And I can give you the name of somebody on Bond Street that uh, can get you a pocket watch. And I never got the name from him. That to me is one of the biggest regrets of my life because he died soon thereafter. And I never got the name of this dealer, sales, whatever. And I that sticks with me. And well, I'm at least, I don't know, what, 13 years, 14 years away from that conversation. And I really do want a pocket watch. And I do want a pocket watch that is of note. And I don't even know what that means. But to have a Breguet pocket watch, that would be pretty darn close to a summit.
Yeah. I just recently, one of my friends has a jewelry store here in Vegas, and she had asked me to come kind of help her clean out the safe, which was a crazy moment where I got to see like hundreds and hundreds of vintage watches. And during that process, she was like, I want to thank you for coming out and spending, because she's not a big watch collector like me, but she was looking to me to advise her on what she should get rid of and what she should keep and this and that.
Mhm.
What she should sell, should I say? But during that experience, I found a a vintage regulator pocket watch with a beautiful porcelain dial,
Wow.
and it was still running.
Wow.
And I mean, I don't even know what I think the case is. I mean, I think it's like sterling silver or something. They were using silver a lot more back then than they are now. Um, and yeah, I've been meaning to get it restored, but also I love the utility aspect because the back of it is like a hunter style case where the back folds out and you can use it
Yeah.
as a desk clock and like um and of course, like back then, when you opened it, you could easily like service the movement or regulate it or whatever. um and and I need to get it restored, and
Yeah.
I have it. It's beautiful.
Actually, I was talking to a friend of mine, a couple of people I know. I think from the collector side, I think pocket watches are underappreciated, very underappreciated. And quite frankly, except for the extreme, like a Breguet, you can get them at a reasonable cost if you compare apples to apples, apples to different vintage Apple as far as wristwatches.
Yeah,
There's a certain allure that I don't know. I'm afraid of them only because I see it as another rabbit hole.
it
Uh,
is.
but I think there's some very exquisitely beautiful pieces out there. I'm not talking about the Smith number two, which is incredible. It was magnificent.
Sure,
I
sure,
mean,
sure.
there's just no words can describe it. But I'm just saying that the watches back from the 1800s and maybe even a little earlier, they're just exquisite. And quite frankly, if one is fortunate to go to the Paddock Museum and see their collection, nothing new. There's very little new in the world of watches now that hasn't
Yeah,
been done in pocket watches. There's a different size, of course, and the micro mechanics are different, but they're the same, but they have been minimized. But there's some impressive pieces out there, and that would
I
be fun.
I was at the museum in January. It was January or March. Whenever I was in when I was in a factory, and I also went to Beauvais,
Mhm.
and I got a YouTube video coming out for Beauvais, the Beauvais factory. Phenomenal. But as I went to the Patek Museum, I was literally coming there for the last hour, and they have like the listening tour and all this shit you
Mm.
can buy and all, and I didn't do that. But as I was walking around and I was looking at their, I mean, some of their like enamel dial stuff, I mean, is insane, insane.
It's crazy, and I'm not a paddock collector, but I have incredible respect for that
Yeah,
museum, and I will tell you and the people who might be watching that my wife has very little interest in watches. She has an appreciation now. After 25 years, she's got a little bit of it, but she we spent 3 hours there, and she was engaged, as was I. So you don't have to have a deep appreciation, understanding, or knowledge about watches to really appreciate the artistry and everything they were able to accomplish over the years, particularly on the floor that goes through their history. It is unbelievable. And I was really impressed. I thought my wife would be there. It's time to
they
go. Let's go.
Dep
No.
depending on when you went, because I went last year,
Right.
they have different stories for different like eras.
Mhm.
And yeah, I mean, it's crazy just to start off like at the early days, and as you go up, you see the more
Mhm.
modern watches.
Mhm.
Um and and as I was going through, There was one little nugget because, like I said, I did not pay. I don't think I had time or whatever. I don't know if it was like a guided tour. I think it was a guided tour where they offered the little headsets or whatever.
Yeah.
But I was walking past like a tour group and I eavesdropped for like half a second, and it was probably the most memorable second of my life because the tour guide said at the time Paddock was focused on making the smallest possible watch movement known to man, because if you can make the smallest of something, then like you're like the most respected master, right? Like that was their philosophy. Okay, if we can make the smallest, most complicated watch movement, like we will be the best.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, shit, like never thought about that. It was a cool moment.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course they had the movement there,
Mm-hmm.
that they made. I mean, it was teeny tiny. I mean, like, and you would see it now in like a Blancpain, like cocktail watch or something, like a ladies cocktail watch, but just the
Was it smaller than the Reverso of 101, the caliber 101 from JLC?
I mean it was, I mean maybe like 3 or 4 Tic Tacs.
Mm-hmm.
So
Because I think the 101 is actually smaller.
oh wow.
But
Yeah,
that was developed in the 20s or something like that.
yeah, I think this was on like maybe like the late 1800s.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was kind of cool. I mean, they literally had like a little magnifier that
Mm-hmm.
it would blow it up so you could actually see what the hell, and the decoration.
Uh-huh.
Like who thought to decorate like a little tic tac? Like to me, I thought about those people like who like in. Have you ever seen the little people that engrave rice? Like they do
Yeah,
like
yeah,
little.
yeah. Uh-huh.
I thought about that. Like who the hell would think to do some shit like that?
Well, it ain't me.
Yeah, no,
I have proven I cannot do that kind of micro decoration or even work on a watch. So
I
I'm okay
that
with that.
I get a headache the second I start. I go to these watchmaking courses, and I went to one for J. I actually went to one for Ulysse Nardin where I got to take apart the
Yeah.
Freak Bridge,
Uh-huh.
and then I did one for for JLC where I got to kind of like completely take apart the reverso movement and rebuild it. And they showed how it kind of worked, on both sides. But very shortly into those experiences, I'm like, I already have a headache and I'm frustrated and like,
Well, I have the distinct honor and pleasure of maybe being the only one in a JLC masterclass to not lose a screw. I mean, that's commonplace. I popped the jewel.
really?
Yeah, I I sent the jewel flying, and the master watchmaker. This was actually in Le Sentier. He was not pleased with me, but I still got my certificate. I mean, that just shows you how meaningful that thing is. But I am so proud of the fact that I popped the jewel. I sent it flying across the room. So beat that.
I think this brings a good kind of like segue to, not only are you writing your, Time on My Hands book, but you are writing a fiction book,
Yeah.
right? And
Mhm.
you told me about that. And I specifically say that for the end of our discussion because we are, approaching over an hour now of just straight nuggets. Uh, and I can't wait to get the feedback from the collectors, because we've always wanted to get a collector on. We've been waiting for a moment like this, because every collector has a different perspective, and yours is exceptional. But tell us about your second book, please, and thank you.
When I was starting to write this first book, I was communicating with a friend of mine who actually lives in the UK, and we read similar books. And he was very complimentary. Oh, you're doing something fun, and he said you should write a mystery book a murder mystery involving watches. I said, okay, that's great. Around the same time, a watchmaker who found out I was writing this book said, I should write a book about my customers, my collectors. And I said to him, name will not be spoken. That's a really bad idea because you writing about your collectors, knowing this guy, it would not go well. So I put that aside. And but this thing about murder mysteries, like, yeah, that's interesting. And a year ago on Mother's Day, I was going out with my wife, and as we were crossing the street, I looked at her and I said, I've got a plot. I understand the plot. And she said, what? I said, I got it. So we went and sat down at the bar, and I'm telling her a little bit about the plot. We're kind of problem solving a little bit of it, and basically got the nugget. And then mid dinner, I said, I've got an idea for another book. This one's a matching collector and watchmaker. That's a project for the future. But the basis of the book was the following. In the early 2000s, there was a watchmaker came from Hungary and set up a business in upstate New York, I believe, called the Budapest Watch Company. And he developed a watch movement that was perpetual in the sense of much like the Atmos clock has power due to the expansion contraction of a gas in its bellows in the Atmos clock. He took two pieces of metal, and I actually have his patent. He took
Wow.
two metals, put them together, and they have different heating points. And so when there's a change in temperature, the metals expand and contract differently. And by virtue of that movement, wound the mainspring. And he claimed that he had on his workbench a movement that had been running for more than a month perfectly
Wow.
without being touched. And he was going to case it and sell it for a gazunga amount of money. But then he died, and of natural causes, whatever.
Sure.
And nothing ever came of it. His estate buried it. I don't know why. I don't know what happened, but it never came to fruition. I suspect I know why. I have a theory. Let's put it that way. Why it never got marketed, but I'm not going to tell you because it's part of the book. So
Sure.
I said, okay, what would watch companies do if this watch movement was real and was being developed? And what would happen around that? And that's the basis of the book. And I started writing it, and I was having a blast. I mean, I could kill people. No, I don't get arrested. I mean, I have a body count in this book of 5, and it was fun. So that book is actually done. I still have some, I think, work to do on it, but it's out with a couple of friends to read it to make sure the story makes sense. I think there's some weak points that need to be strengthened. And then when we're done with all the rigmarole over this first book, then I'm going to start working with this editor, and we're going to put that out there ultimately. But in the interim, I've started another book because I'm having so much fun, and it's again involving watches, and this one's a little bit more dealing with the marketing of watches and the in not so much the industry, but the I'll just leave it at that. And I don't want to give away too much. I'm 68 pages into it, and I kind of know who the bad guy is. And I already have a body count of 5, and so I'm deciding who else I want to knock off for the sake of the story. It's fun. It's great. You do get a little bit caught up in it. For the first murder mystery, I came to a point I needed the name of somebody, and I chose the the name of the woman who comes to clean our house. And I got to a point in the book where she's such a sweet lady. She's been with us for 20 years. And I had to decide whether I was going to kill her or not. And I just couldn't. I couldn't kill her. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't look at her face every week and say, "I just killed you." So, so and now she's a recurrent, minor character, but she's a recurrent character because what I'm building is a recurrent series with same characters.
Amazing.
It's fun.
And yeah, I mean, another great book for us to look out for.
I,
Um,
the working title is "Time for Sale." See,
Time
I
for
got a
so.
thing going. I'm going to do the time series. I have a title for the next one. I think the next murder mystery.
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming we're gonna be able to get all these books online on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. Tell us how we can buy these books.
The books are available on every platform on the internet.
Okay.
The most common being, of course, Amazon, but
Sure.
on Barnes and Noble online, everything, the books available uh, across the board. It's exciting, it's fun, and I hope my my biggest audience appreciates it. That being my sons.
Yeah, I know I'll enjoy it for sure, and I can't wait to get hands on. And everybody, if you're listening, you can go on Amazon right now and pick up the copy, digital, paper, whatever, of Time on My Hands, the book Mr. Mitch here wrote for all of us as collectors. Um, and is there anything, we're coming here to the end here, almost a short feature film here that we've done with you. We turn over our platform to our guests. So we've went through a lot, we've covered a lot. Is there anything you did not feel like you did not get a chance to say or cover? Because here is your time.
Without being repetitive, I don't think so. I mean, to me, if I'm going to be a prophet, kind of over the top, but if my wish is to foster the enjoyment of something that I love, and whether it is an Apple Watch or a Swatch watch or whatever, I hope that people enjoy the sensation, the fun of putting something on their wrist every day, and in time, maybe make it to mechanical watches and appreciate the intensity, the the micro mechanics, what these watchmakers go through to produce these miraculous devices that operate in such tiny tolerances. There are a lot of car guys out there, and they are just so fantastic about it. As it was explained to me, when you're talking about a watch, I'm sorry, when you're talking about a car and the car engines, the tolerances that you are excited about are the width of a penny. Okay. The tolerances that a watchmaker is dealing with is less than the width of a hair. And yet they get these devices to work with such perfection day in and day out. A car, most cars are built to last 8 years, something like that. Watches are built to work for centuries. Think about that. The artistry, the mechanics, they are there for way beyond our time on this mortal coil. And that is phenomenal. and appreciate them for who they are and what these pieces represent. If one person could hear that message, I've done my thing.
And conveniently, you can wear a watch from the moment that you wake up till the moment that you go asleep with zero effort.
And it where I live, there are a lot of high performance cars. I don't get it. Okay, they get to the next traffic light first. You won. And how often can you put a high performance car to the test of what they truly are built for? Watches, from the minute you put it on to the minute you take it off and beyond, are functioning at the maximum capability of what they were built to do. It's a different world.
I can say with certainty, like all of us, I get tired of driving. I will never get tired of wearing watches.
Likewise.
Thank you so much for joining us. I've enjoyed this very much. I hope that everybody out there listening took a lot of value in what Mitch said. We are certainly going to link his book, again, Time on My Hands, A Collector's Journey in the World of Watches, by Mr. Mitch Katz, sitting in front of us. Make sure you go out and buy this book, because I think this is going to be a unique perspective on what it's like to collect watches from a very, very, very seasoned collector. Thank you so much, Mitch. You're going to have to get us a signed copy. You have to get us a signed copy for my collection. And next time I'm your way, I will certainly make a plan to come see you, which is not going to be too long from now. So
please, I look forward to it, and I wish everybody just keep watching.
Keep watching. Thank you so much, Mitch, and we will see you listeners on the next episode.